Hey everybody, it's Decap here, and in this video we have some huge changes to Mythic Plus coming in the War Within. These come off the back of some other fix changes that they did a week or two ago at this point, and these changes are quite huge. We're going to go through this little blue post here, and of course I will be giving my thoughts on it as well as we go and afterwards. So let's go through the blue article first. Greetings, Dungeoners. This week's beta update includes major changes to Mythic Plus Keystone Affix system in the War Within based on player feedback. Yes, yes, yes. Previously, the approach of Mythic Keystones was a one-size-fits-all, which proved challenging for them, right? Challenging for Blizzard in striking the right balance and limited our design space. So they had less room to innovate because they were trying to make the same +4 key be as similar as possible to a +20 key, right? And so that is very hard to do. I agree. In this new build, you will see significant shifts to design philosophy. We recognize the importance of weekly variety for those progressing through the system. However, for players pushing high keys, this variance can sometimes feel restrictive. We've heard your feedback. This is something that they've been very good at ever since the very end of Shadowlands, is actually listening to feedback. This update to the fix system will meet diverse expectations, at least aims to meet at it. And I'll be overall positive about this because I already know the general changes here. So a fix update overview. We're reducing the total number of mechanical fixes on a keystone for players progressing through the system from 2 to 1. The following affixes are being retired: Sanguine, Bolstering, Raging, and Bursting. Sanguine, Puddles on the Ground. People have really disliked this one. I hated it when it was original. I don't care as much now that it's nerfed, but generally just not a liked affix. Bolstering, I never minded bolstering personally. I think it's cool when a mob gets big and like can devastate you or whatever, and you have to kind of deal with that. I will say this: my funnest pull of Dragonflight Mythic Plus was in Everbloom. My tank did an insane pull. It was like just a weekly key, right? So it wasn't a high key. But my tank did like an insane pull in Everbloom. You normally pull a lot of trash at the beginning of Everbloom. He pulled the normal big pull at the beginning of Everbloom, plus like 2 or 3 more packs. And there was the biggest bolstered mob you've ever seen at the end of this thing. And we're just kiting it out. And it was actually funny. And we had like 1 or 2 deaths, but it was a huge pull, tons of damage. And then like this giant bolstered mob. It was really funny. Raging, Bursting. Bursting, obviously, it ruins big pulls. Just generally, it does. Raging, they've nerfed and changed this affix, but again, it's not considered to be like a very fun to deal with affix. So then they also heard feedback on these other affixes that they did. I don't think I ever even actually made a video about this, but they were going to do Reckless, Focused, Attuned, and Thorned, and these were like damage buffs for one group of players, and so every week a different set of players could be strong, but some players had more advantages than others depending on the spec or class or whatever. And so they're actually not going to do these as well. Will no longer apply to keystones. So they're getting rid of the last change that they did, and they're getting rid of some other affixes that people want to get rid of. Our one bucket of active affixes for players progressing through the system offers variety along with positive effects for executing these affixes that apply more evenly. We're reintroducing thematic elements to affixes by invoking Zaltaleth and Mythic Keystones. So people really liked seasonal affixes as long as they were done well. I think they thought people didn't like it because the last seasonal affix we had was terrible, and so it was just bad. The storm, I don't even remember what it was called. It was first season of Dragonflight. It was just terrible. So yeah, we're utilizing passive affixes to signpost expected increases in player mastery. We're aiming to eliminate push weeks, and then new affixes. Starting at Keystone level +2, Zaltaleth herself will manifest in dungeons, introducing a rotation of affixes under the banner of Zaltaleth's Bargain. Those affixes not only seek to empower the dungeon denizens, but also grant players the opportunity to harness their effects. For our first test this week, we'll have Zaltaleth's Bargain affixes available. One affix is an event that players must deal with periodically, while the other affix is a passive effect on creatures throughout the dungeon. So for Zaltaleth's Bargain Ascendant, while in combat, Zaltaleth rains down orbs of cosmic energy that attempt to empower nearby enemies, increasing their haste and movement speed. If players disrupt these orbs, they claim the effect for themselves. I don't know what that means. I don't know if you'll have to disrupt. Do you have to do damage to them? Do you have to heal them? Do you have to dispel them? I have no idea. Hopefully it's something fairly straightforward. But this is a buff, right? It's an affix that can buff you. Zaltaleth's Bargain Frenzied. Non-boss enemies become frenzied at 30% health, so it's kind of like raging in a way, right? Increasing their haste by 40%, but increasing damage taken by 20%. So you get that nice little execute at the end, which again, this is going to actually make pulls easier because people generally are going to pop their cooldowns at the beginning of the pull, and then at the end of the pull, that's when things kind of slow down, right? So this actually is a very, very good buff to players for an affix there. Starting at Keystone level 7, so 7 is one, at least in how it works in Dragonflight, this is one level higher than your minimum to get Aspect Crest. So you could still, if it's the same, I'm not sure if it's the same, but if it's the same, you could still get Aspect Crests at +6 without dealing with this. But this is an interesting one. This is the one part that I think people might complain a lot about, if anything at all. Starting at +7, a new affix, Challenger's Peril, directly affects the dungeon timer. The affix emphasizes precise play and strategic execution, placing greater risk at players' decisions. Challenger's Peril. Dying subtracts 15 seconds instead of 5 seconds. So more death penalty, basically. What do I think about this? For weekly keys, it's really not going to matter. For pushing keys, it's going to make it a lot harder. Obviously, you don't want to have deaths at all. But if you're going to have deaths, it's going to be even more punishing. And obviously, if you're doing below +7s, it's not going to affect you at all. Obviously, there's a big, especially from the more casual community, really hates the timer. Some people even in the non-casual community hate the timer, that they have timers at all. So anything that's going to make the timer more profound is going to definitely get ire from those people. So, it's something to think about there. Maybe they could think of a different way to do the same thing. I don't know. And then starting at Keystone +12. So +12s are going to be considered push. Like that's when you're doing high keys. Okay. A new affix will replace the Zaltaleth's Bargain, and instead it's going to be a Guile. It's going to be Zaltaleth's Guile. Zaltaleth betrays players, revoking her bargains, increasing health and damage of enemies by 20%. So Zaltaleth's Guile is going to basically be like an extra fortified tyrannical on stuff, basically. So that's kind of how that one's going to work. So next we're going to be addressing fortified and tyrannical. Fortified and tyrannical now serve as milestone affixes that alternate between keystone levels +4 and +10 on a weekly rotation. So +4 will be fortified one week, +4 key will be tyrannical the next week. If you get to +10, then you're just going to have both of them. It'll technically rotate. Now maybe this will mean that the fortified the +4 affix maybe will have less strength and the +10 one will have more strength or something. Maybe they clarify that down here. But yeah, basically once you get to +10, you'll have both fortified and tyrannical. Again, kind of pushing keys there. Here's an example what keystones will look like under this new model. Keystone levels 2 through 11 have the following affixes. Zaltaleth's Bargain at +2. +4 is fortified or tyrannical. +7's the dungeon timer thing. And +10, you get the other one, tyrannical or fortified. And then +12 and up, you have fortified, Challenger's Peril, tyrannical, Zaltaleth's Guile instead. Now what this does, right, when you have these, is you have the same exact affixes every single week. And so the affixes are just making the dungeons harder. And so I believe when it comes to the high key stuff that they are mostly hitting it. And again, the only thing that I think there's going to be some complaints about is what the Challenger's Peril does, which is makes the dungeon timer more penalizing. I think that'll be the only thing, really. We're evaluating how dungeon scores are granted under this new model. We believe these changes, along with heroic and mythic dungeon changes, provide players a ways to engage with dungeons setting they prefer, fresh look at Mythic Plus, etc., etc. Okay, so overall, I think these are great. Honestly, I didn't expect them to do this, if I'm being completely honest, because a lot of the complaints. So the complaints you hear more from the casual community is the dungeon timer, right? That's the number one thing. Now they did address this by making Mythic Zeros actually mean something, so you don't have a dungeon timer in there. So maybe that's how they felt that they addressed that. However, for the high end people, this addresses almost everything. I am technically a high end person, right? I always say the high end people like I'm not one of them. I technically am. You'll find I can walk into a high key and be perfectly comfortable. I can get CE like I do every tier and be perfectly comfortable. I'm fine in that environment, but a lot of times I don't consider myself one of them because I don't have the same complaints as them a lot of times. But yeah, I do. These are the type of people that I follow or interact with or look to or whatever. And so what they complain about is mostly addressed in here, and I think in a very pretty good way. I won't say very good way. I would say like a B+ way, like a very good way. That these changes are being done. Now there's some like once you get to +12, the keys are going to be really hard, right? You're going to have Fortified, Tyrannical, the Guile, the Dungeon Timer penalty. So like keys are going to be very hard, but it is going to come from the dungeon, which is what people are saying they wanted. So maybe you see some nerfs to Fortified, some nerfs to Tyrannical, or something like that, and maybe you let this Guile thing kind of carry the load as far as difficulty goes. I'm not sure where that'll go as far as that goes, but what I do know is, and what we can say for sure, so what I'll say for sure is this is going to be seen as positive. Maybe you don't like it personally, but overall this is going to be seen as positive changes, and what it is, no matter what, is it's exciting. This is a complete shakeup of Mythic Plus. And the fact that they did it so fast must mean that they kind of had this in their bag and were like trying to make slow play this type of thing or something. And they're like, screw it, we'll just send it. Because this is a very short amount of time to completely throw these in the trash and then have this whole new system ready to go. So I wonder if they were kind of slow playing into this or something. It wouldn't surprise me if they have a seasonal type of fix ready for every tier just in case, because people like seasonals, and I think they liked seasonals for the most part. And then they just made the wrong decision when people were complaining about one a lot because that one was bad, right? Instead of saying, okay, this one was bad, we'll do a better one. They just got rid of them. But so yeah, this is pretty cool, and they're going to be ones that can. And it says these are the first two, so there might be like a whole range of bargains that Zelzloth helps you with or whatever, and gives you extra damage or extra haste, and so that's really cool too. And that, again, that's kind of like a these are going to be buffs that make the dungeon easier, so that's really good as well. So if you're just doing regular keys or you're just starting keys, doing these buffs will be really good for you, because you'll be like, okay, I this is going to help us out doing these things, and you'll see them be less prioritized maybe as you get into like weekly keys or people not caring as much. People are still going to do them to get buffs, but yeah, and either way, like I said, this is going to be looked upon very, very favorably from most of the Mythic Plus community. It'll be actually people who don't do Mythic Plus because they already don't like the timer. They're like, oh, they're making the timer even harder. That's pretty much the only complaint I see out of this. I personally, I don't love Mythic Plus, right? So like, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care that much about the timer, like, or having the increased timer. I also don't care too much about the other things that the higher end Mythic Plusers were complaining about. But I do know that these are really innovative attempts at changing and overhauling the Mythic Plus system, which we haven't really seen yet. So we've had the basic same structure of Mythic Plus. They've made some tweaks. Dragonflight, especially towards the end, at the very end, they made a big tweak. But we've seen basically the same system since Legion. And so this is an overhaul, probably much needed. And we'll see how it goes. We'll have testing this weekend. I will be testing myself. And as well as testing Rat Paladin stuff, I'll let you know how I think these affixes go. So very excited about that. So that'll be it for this one. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel because that helps me out a lot. If you're already a subscriber, I encourage you to check out the Patreon, which will be in the description below. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.